Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Wilson and this is the American Indian Languages course. In this video, I provide a brief overview of some of the structural features of word and sentence formation in the indigenous languages of North America. There is a great deal of variation among the languages of the Americas in the ways in which words are built. Look at this example in Kanien'kehá:ka. Notice how this one-word sentence conveys all the information mentioned in the translation. This is not the only way Kanien'kehá:ka speakers say this sentence, but it's one of options that's not usually available for speakers of English. This process, called noun incorporation, is extremely restricted in English. For example, in English we can say, I sat the dog last night, or a dog sat last night. But this type of structure, where the noun and verb form one unit, is not very productive in English. But it's very productive in Kanien'kehá:ka and the other indigenous languages. Another aspect of word structure that may appear odd to speakers of European languages is the possibility in several indigenous languages of building words from a single root combined with a fairly large number of suffixes. Linguists call this polysynthesis. A polysynthetic language is a language in which, by incorporation, whole sentences can be expressed by a single word. We may find extensive word building in English and the other languages. For example, this English word
anti-disestablishmentarianism.
But these complex words in English refer to one entity, whereas in polysynthetic languages, complex words with multiple morphemes are equivalent to an entire sentence. For example, the following Yupik word, which is translated as I really don't want to go in English, is nothing out of the ordinary for a Yupik speaker. Of course, not all words in Yupik are this complex, but polysynthesis is certainly a characteristic of the language. In many indigenous languages, the distinction between nouns and verbs is not as straightforward as in European languages. Let's look at some examples in Mosan languages. One interesting aspect of the word structure of languages of the Mosan family is their tendency to employ roots which appear not to carry a distinction as to whether they are nouns or verbs, as if that distinction did not matter. An example of this comes from the Inuit-Aleut language. According to Edward Sapir, the word meaning fire in the house in the Inuit-Aleut language is not really a noun as the translation might suggest. Sapir goes on to say that the root meaning fire is really as much a verbal entity as a nominal one. It may be glossed as fire or as burn according to the context. There are a lot of examples found in these languages. Salishan language are well known for having an extensive number of word roots that can be either a noun or a verb. However, it's important to notice that while the category of the roots may be ambiguous, the final word or expression is not, because context clarifies the meaning. Now let's look at some examples of the structure of sentences in some North American Indian languages. There are many aspects of the grammar of American Indian languages which can help to distinguish one language from another, and word order is one of them. I present here just a few examples that I hope will help to illustrate the diversity of sentence types and languages. The first language is Greenlandic, from the Inuit-Aleut family. Greenlandic is a dialect of Inuit language spoken by 3 Inuit subgroups. As can be seen from the example, Greenlandic syntax is quite different from English. In Greenlandic, the main verb appears at the end of the sentence. Greenlandic and Inuktitut more generally does not make use of prepositions, but rather marks the objects with a suffix. Such grammatical choices in word order divide the word's languages into various groups. Linguistic typology is the subfield in linguistics that studies and classifies languages according to their structural and functional properties. I invite you to take a look at the World Atlas of Language Structures, or WALS, a large online database of structural properties of languages gathered from descriptive materials like grammars on the languages of the world, including information of over 500 indigenous languages of the Americas. Inuit-Aleut is a Muslim language spoken along the western coast of Vancouver Island on the west coast of North America. Unlike Greenlandic Inuit or English, notice that the verb appears at the beginning of the sentence in Inuit-Aleut. This is certainly more unusual than the pattern we saw for Greenlandic and Inuit. Diné-Bizaad is a language primarily spoken by the Diné people who have traditionally been living in an area which is now part of 4 states: Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. In Diné-Bizaad, the pattern is similar to Greenlandic Inuit, with the verb at the end of the sentence. But notice that in Diné-Bizaad, prefixes rather than suffixes are used to mark the grammatical relationships among words. Notice that in this example, and everything in the word before the verb root belongs to one or another of the numerous grammatical markers used in Diné-Bizaad. So, in the expression meaning begins to carry him, or in a more complex example, as this one meaning he picks me up, there are at least 10 distinct prefix positions for the verb and dozens of different prefixes. Kanien'keha is a Haudenosaunee language spoken in the northeastern United States. The word order in Kanien'keha is actually quite free, as demonstrated by this example. Notice that all these examples, regardless of the word order, have the same meaning, although there might be slight nuances which distinguish them according to the context. It's like saying in English, I like beans versus beans I like, which are 2 perfect English sentences in which the word order is different. And although the meaning is similar, English speakers will use one versus the other in a specific context. Anyway, going back to Kanien'keha, how can we know who are doing the hitting and who is being hit in these sentences? Well, this information is actually encoded in the verb. The presence of the infix honwa encodes the information that a female is doing something to a male. All those examples shows that there is a great deal of variation in word and sentence structure in the indigenous languages of the Americas. One of the interesting aspects of language is the area of semantics, or meaning of words. But what I will talk about in here has also to do with the relationship between language and culture. You have probably heard of the supposedly enormous number of words for snow in Inuit. This is a myth that has been debunked. But did you know that the Inuit-Aleut people have several terms for salmon? The Inuit-Aleut are maritime people living in the western coast of Vancouver Island in the Pacific Northwest. The Inuit-Aleut have probably always been fishers, and salmon has always been their staple diet. Here's a list of words used by the Inuit-Aleut people in talking about salmon. Notice that these are all distinct individual words with little or no apparent relationships to each other, unlike the English translations of these words, which usually use an expression with the word salmon in it. Also notice that these lists do not have a word that means only salmon. This is because in Inuit-Aleut, the word for salmon is samin, a word borrowed from English. You may be asking, why should people who make their livelihood for fishing for salmon have no word of their own for this fish? Well, in answering this question, it's important to think in terms of the culture of the people. Salmon is an important aspect of the Inuit-Aleut culture, and this is reflected in the language. For the Inuit-Aleut, salmon on its own cannot be spoken of. It's always referred to as the kind of salmon. The season and age of the fish are important because the particular life stage of the fish has a bearing on its availability and edibility, etc., which could not be expressed by using just the word salmon. So instead of one word, the Inuit-Aleut has a large number of different words related to salmon and to salmon fishing. This is an example of what Franz Boas called the principle of cultural relativity, or the notion that cultural traits, including languages, are best understood in the context of the cultural system of which they are part. The study of vocabulary as a guide to the ways in which members of a society divide up the universe or the culture is part of the field of cognitive anthropology or ethnosemantics. That's all for now. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you liked the video, please click like, and thanks for watching. Ciao.